Number 12, joyful, joyful.
Second verse. All islands rejoice around thee, earth and heaven reflect. Stars and angels sing around thee, center of unbroken praise. Field and forest, and mountain groves,
Let's bow our head for a prayer. Our most gracious, loving Heavenly Father, we thank you for your Sabbath day. We thank you for your message that we learned this morning. At this moment, we have a health program in the afternoon. Please bless the speaker and bless the topic that we're going to learn this afternoon. In Jesus' name, amen. Good afternoon. It's my honor and privilege to present and introduce to you our speaker this afternoon, Professor Paul Casillas from the School of Allied Health Professions in Loma Linda. Paul Casillas grew up in Southern California. After his graduation from San Joaquin Valley College in Rancho Cucamonga, he continued his studies at Loma Linda University and obtained a bachelor degree in respiratory therapy and a master degree in respiratory care. He has been practicing respiratory therapy for 15 years. Currently, he is an assistant professor at the School of Allied Health Professions, Loma Linda University, where he concentrates on his research on artificial mechanical ventilation, process improvement, high-frequency ventilation, and community outreach. Paul, thank you for taking your precious time to come to our church this Sabbath afternoon to share with us your knowledge on the function of our lungs. The time is yours.
Hello. Test. Nice to meet you all. My name is Paul Casillas. I am an assistant professor at Loma Linda University, and I have been working at Loma Linda now for about 5 to 7 years as an instructor, and I have slowly worked my way up into research so that way I could obtain my assistant professorship, and then I am continuing my research now as I go forward. I worked in the hospital for 15 years, not just as a respiratory therapist, but I also worked in organ donation as a bedside coordinator to facilitate the gift of life so that way it can continue on in organ recipients. So I have been around Loma Linda for a number of years, usually in the background, trying to just make sure everything's running nice and smoothly for everyone, so that way no one really notices when there's an issue. So today, the topic is something that's very special to me. As a respiratory therapist, I have dedicated my entire life to studying one very simple thing. That's it. Just take a nice deep breath, sir. Take a nice deep breath, ma'am. Just take a deep breath and just relax. God will take care of everything. So today, I want to just give you guys some simple and very practical things that will help you improve your health to keep you from suffering from the complications of COPD, of asthma, of chronic bronchitis, all those things that kind of come at you and try to, take a little bit of your life away. I'm going to show you how to try to keep them away. So first things first, just to get everyone on the same page, we're going to do a real quick breathing exercise. Respiratory therapist, we have to do that. So as this begins, I want everyone to just look at this little dot and then just follow along. Take a deep breath when it expands, and then as it collapses, go ahead and exhale. Right? You got me? Okay, one more time. If it will listen. And no, it won't. My apologies. I use a lot of stuff in my PowerPoints. Sometimes they work great, sometimes they don't. But today was one of those days where it worked only the first time. So our objectives today are going to be simple. What is simple, first of all? Because as I've come to figure out in my studies and teaching students, what you would think is simple and common sense is not really so simple or common sense to some people. So going back over the basics and just redefining or defining the same thing so everyone's on the same page is important. And then we're going to define what exactly is breathing. Will not do. We need to get a little more in-depth with that. And then what impacts this person's breathing? If I am taking these breaths in and out every single second of the day, what can make me unable to do that so that way I can avoid it? It's pretty simple once you see it and once you think about it, but it does have to be said. And then that leads us to the next thing is, if I know what these things are, and if I know how they're going to affect me, how can I keep them from affecting me so I can stay healthy? God gave me the ability to reason and gave me the ability to objectively measure. So that means I can look for the problems and avoid them. And then what can I do to improve my environment? I have 3 children. I got a house with my parents. We all take care of everything. Everyone makes sure that house is clean. So it's a team effort. Well, I went to school for breathing, so I'm going to make sure the air in that house is healthy for my children. Because I have asthma, my family has asthma. We are severe persistent asthmatics. Someone's got to make sure that house's air is nice and clean. So let's start off with the objective. The first one, what is simple? According to Webster's definition, it is plain, free from all additions or embellishments. It's a simple design, and of course, it never goes out of fashion. Okay, it's always going to work, and if it's always going to work, it can't be, can't turn it off. So it's also going to be unaffected and free from any intent to deceive or impress. It just works. It's simple. I'm not here to try to impress you. I'm just trying to be here to show you what is simple to clean the house and keep it nice. And then it's a pure concept. There's nothing I'm trying to include. There's no technology. Trust me, my students get mad at me because I try to include technology all over the place. I'm just keeping it simple. A motor, a fan, and a filter. So the questions to start. How does the body work when it comes to breathing? And how does oxygen and carbon dioxide affect us? We make carbon dioxide, we use oxygen. So what is that relationship? And then lastly, how can you ensure that the breathing of another is safe? Because if someone is smoking walking down the pathway and I'm walking through that, that's not going to be good for me. So we got to look out for those things. So what is breathing? This is the medical terms that I would use on my students. The biological process where atmospheric gas is pulled into the respiratory tract, in other words, the lungs, and exchanges with the end products of metabolism in the blood through diffusion. And in other words, when your metabolism increases because you're running, or when you get sick, your body's going to need to breathe harder, so it's going to use more oxygen. It's going to produce more carbon dioxide. So the body's going to have to work harder to get those things out. That's one of the hard parts about getting sick, is the body can't do that effectively. In fact, it gets tired. These muscles get sick. They get lactic acid buildup. They can't function well. And then they fall behind because I can't breathe and keep up with all this production of carbon dioxide, because that will unfortunately kill me if it gets too high. So I got to keep breathing. Remember, you can go 7 days without food. You can go a few days without water, but you can only go a few minutes without breathing. So what impacts the breathing? What really does impact it? Well, make it simple. Smoking, bad. Hookah, bad. The hookah one actually came about because I worked at Loma Linda. I didn't even know about hookah until I went to Loma Linda, because the professors I work with are from the Middle East. So they exposed me through research of how these things that they deal with in their country are so bad that they're publishing it over here before these things become fashionable. So the whole hookah craze that when I was going through high school, that never got far because there was a lot of publishing to show how bad it was. And then it never really took off. It was just a fad that lasted a little bit of time. So, no smoking, good. Very simple stuff, nothing too complicated. But remember, that doesn't just mean you're not smoking. That means you're not around people who are smoking. So cigar smoking, cigarette smoking, vape pens. I'm sorry to say this, vape pens are also unhealthy. Vape pens are only healthy in the context that they help a person quit smoking, not to do something for fun, because they're just harming your body. Now, these are the ones where it's kind of sideways. It's not really clear. You know, I need energy, but energy produces pollution. Energy keeps me warm at night, especially these nights when I'm running my heater. But at the same time, if you're not careful with it or observing the environment to make sure everything's safe, it can really harm all of us. I mean, we saw last year when the train derailed over in, I believe it was Ohio, and all the chemicals spilled. And then everyone started having trouble and issues because, you know, you have all these chemical spills that are related to all of this other stuff. So it creates, you know, it's not an easy question. It has to be, you know, looked at and examined. What's the benefit? What's the risk? Same thing with the fire. If you're using a fire to stay warm, that's beneficial. You're keeping yourself safe from the cold. But at the same time, that fire has to release heat. It has to release pollution, smoke, particles that you inhale, things that are bad for you. So it's not positive, it's not negative, it's kind of in the middle. Helps you now, but it has complications and hazards. And then my son wanted me to put the last one on because he said, you know, campfires aren't bad, Dad. We can have marshmallows on a stick. I said, you're right, son. In which case, you know, I will deal with that pollution so we can have nice s'mores. You know, good family experiences are also important to take into consideration. So what does that look like in real life? Well, to get some good examples and to see what our environment looks like in these cities that we live in, I got my drone and I flew it up about 300 feet and started taking pictures all around in the morning and then all around in the evening to see what the pollution looks like in the morning versus night. So that way I can see where the pollution's going and I can see where I should be working. That's why I work at Loma Linda. So this is right over my house, flew it 100 meters up in the air, took a nice good picture, and I saw all the smog. And I said, this isn't good. In fact, the smog was going towards the LA area, so I was like, okay, I'm moving away from LA area. However, when you work in Loma Linda, you also have to deal with San Bernardino County. And unfortunately, San Bernardino County is just, you know, really short distance from Loma Linda, so we do get all of those local fires that happen because of the large homeless community. And these are not small fires, these are fires that have lots of trash, a lot of, you know, weird things in them. They release all this smoke, and then it's just blowing downwind towards the hospital. And then we just have to live with it. So seeing these things, it just brings to mind, my patients are downwind from this, and we're, you know, we have filters and everything, but still, that shouldn't happen. Which brings me to Los Angeles. Obviously, you know, you've all seen what LA looks like in the middle of the day. This is at noon. It's smoggy, it's not clean, you're walking through this and inhaling all of this all day. It's not going to be good on the health. Versus Loma Linda. This is right outside of Loma Linda Med Center. I took this just a few months ago. It was, windy day, so it's blowing all the stuff away, so it's really nice and clean air. And I got this really beautiful picture, and I was very happy with it because I knew that day that I wasn't having any breathing issues. And you can see why I'm not having breathing issues. This is another place that is a good example to show the difference. Does anyone know where this is? This is a hard one, but it's also a fun one. Tahoe. I got to go to Tahoe for a convention, was driving down the mountain, took a picture when I was at the top, and I could not believe how clean the air was. And then I realized, well, there's no people. And then I realized I want to go back to Andrews University to hang out for another week because there's no people. It's very clean. It's very nice. And then you come back to California and you're like, okay. So how do we observe this? We've gone over all these things that can affect us, but how do we, avoid these things? This is a lot of things to bring to people's mind without a solution. So the first one's the easy one. This is the observation. Use your eyes and use your ears and also your nose. That's not the fun one though, because if you can smell it, it's technically inside. So use your eyes and your ears to look for the smoke in the sky. Look for those fires as they're starting. And then listen for the radio reports. In Fontana, because I have to drive through Fontana to get to Loma Linda, we have a lot of pallet fires that just, and the next thing you know, the whole entire sky is black and everything's orange. So those are the rough days because that's when I'm driving through it and I have nothing but asthma going on because, the sky's filled with pollution. Major events of weather are also another one. The pollen season. Oh my. The pollen season is horrible for asthma in the ER. It gets really bad. You just see all these kids come in, puffy eyes, runny noses, tears in the eyes, just from all the allergies, and then they can't breathe. So you have to constantly be ready for this. So what I do is in the morning, I look at my AQI, Air Quality Index. So the weather people, they know that we are looking at all this and they're trying to help us. They want to figure out how can we get the information to the people so they can figure out what they need to do without us telling them what to do. So the Air Quality Index, can I get a quick show of hands of everyone that's heard of it or has not heard of it? If you've heard of it, raise your hand. If you've never heard of it, raise your hand. Perfect, good. As long as there's one person, I can rest easy because I am showing someone something that they have never seen before. So the AQI stands for the Air Quality Index, and it is the tool that is available to us for free. Also, that's the big thing, it's free. And since it's free, that means it's easy to use. But it's a little hard to read. So it's published hourly. In fact, it's going on right now. And there's actually one, I took some measurements from down your street that they're collecting, and I got them for you guys so you can see what it looks like last night. So the AQI is essentially these 5 markers. The AQI measures the amount of ozone that is present at the ground, the amounts of particle pollution, carbon monoxide, sulfur dioxide, and nitrogen dioxide. And if the number is ever over 100, it's automatically bad. So it's pretty simple. If any of these numbers are reporting over 100, you should be aware that it could be bad for your health that day in that area. So it's also color-coded. Green is good, yellow is a concern. Anything darker than yellow, we should be worried. In fact, at the school district that my son goes to, because he goes to public school, they actually utilize these to figure out when the kids are not going outside. If the day is reported to be orange or below, the kids are restricted from playing outside for recess because the air is just too unhealthy. They've had too many incidents of kids having asthma attacks going to recess when this was actually observed and followed. So it does have some useful implementations on the public level too. Now, when you go to the website to actually look at it, it's just this. You just type in your address or the zip code, and it will just tell you flat out what the number is for the day in that zip code. and then you can just go about your day or stay inside if you choose to, or just run the fan with the air filter to make sure that everything's fine. Now, it does report those 5 values. So those 5 values, the highest one gets reported. So that's where it gets a little bit harder because you don't know which of those 5 is the problem unless you look into it. So there could be a little bit of just, a higher incidence of carbon monoxide in the air in that area, which, is a concern. Remember Aliso Viejo Canyon with all those gas leaks? If we see a lot of gas in the air, we want to know why. But we got to keep looking and keep going and trying to figure out. We can see right here that this day there was an increase in ozone on the floor. Now, that's a lot of variables and a lot of numbers, but today the only thing we're going to focus on is the most easiest one that is simple to follow, which is particle size 2.5. Now, the particle size 2.5 is actually a measurement. You're measuring the size of the little things floating in the air. Everyone, when you clean your house and you whip out and you whip the blanket and all the dust flies in the air, that's particle size that's above 10. Particle size 2.5 and smaller is smaller than your hair. You can't see it, but it can be measured. And if you're inhaling it, they have found that it can increase chances of cancer, it can increase chances of bronchospasm, it can increase chances of asthma attacks. A lot of things are associated when these particle levels go too high. So this is just a quick graphical representation that shows human hair is typically 50 to 70. But when we say PM10, you're talking about something that is 5 times smaller than human hair. And when you're saying PM 2.5, well, that's even smaller. Inhaling stuff that's this small, if it goes inside and gets stuck, well, it's going to be difficult to get out. The more crud and junk that gets stuck inside here, the more stuff that it becomes difficult to get out and increases chance of all kinds of infections. So here's another graphic that shows the size related to a pebble on the sand of a beach. Particle size 2.5 is just so small, so small. It's about the size of the COVID bacteria or the COVID virus particle itself. So these are very tiny. And it comes down to, why do we care about that one specifically? And that's because California's Air Resource Board, which is, the people who do all the heavy-duty research of air, gas, environment to see what would be negative to our health, they found that when the particle sizes get this small, it does increase the chance of cancer. And particle size 2.5 is one of the biggest things that's released when people smoke a cigarette. So there's just a little bit more studies, a lot of text, a lot of stuff, just to really drive home that point that there's just more than one person saying this. There's quite a few people and a whole lot of scientists that are dedicating a lot of their time to this one specific particle size. So it's gotten so much that they were actually even able to state that because of particle size 2.5, there was an extra 5,000 premature deaths that occurred in California, an extra 2,800 hospitalizations that occurred because of respiratory illnesses that got exacerbated because of this particle size, and then an extra 6,000 ER visits from asthmatics because they triggered their asthma, which is a very logical thing to state. You're breathing in all this stuff that you're not supposed to breathe, and it's triggering the lung. So this is just that same thing, but with the source material where I got it from, so you could see that I didn't just make it up, but I pulled it straight from California. So all of this eventually comes down to, well, what am I looking at? And they make you a map, and Mrs. Casillas is one of the people who makes maps for a living. So she got her PhD in map making and doing all this stuff. So when she goes and she looks at all the data that they're collecting, she would go in and make these maps to show where the problem is in our geographical location. So we can see right here that there's this little dot that's really hard to see that's changing, but this is the measurement for that hour, for that location, of how much particle 2.5 was present in that location, in that geographical location. And it measures it every hour, on the hour, 24/7, 365, and logs it. And then they make really nice things, but this one is your guys' area. You can see right here, this ND stands for not detecting right now, as in the sensor turned off. So there's usually a guy that's running as soon as it turns off to go turn it back on because someone has to push the button. So as this plays through, you'll be able to see that the particle size 2.5 comes into the area as time goes on. And this was from the past 2 days when it got really cold and the cold air was starting to come in. It started to get that overcast. That overcast is this yellow area coming in because that particle size is in those clouds. And as those clouds come in, it comes in with them. So we can see this again, that as the day goes on and the wind pushes, it pushes that PM 2.5 through the area and increases the amount present. If it stays present for too long, then you could be looking at increases in cancer in that area because it's just so much being inhaled by the people that live there. So Mrs. Casillas, the other thing that she likes to do is she actually likes to take her data readings and try to make stuff with them. So this is what she's doing. Every day since the start of this year, she said, I'm going to make a blanket. Every row is going to be the temperature for the day. And I'm going to do this every single day. She's been every night for about an hour quilting. So she's gotten this far so far. She's doing a great job, but every single color is a different temperature range. There was a lot of arguments over that purple, I gotta tell you. That purple caused a lot of grief in that house that night because it was 49 degrees. The news said 51. My sensor said 49. So it changed the color in the quilt, and it was fun. We have a very fun time going over our data and making stuff with it. So this was a fun one. But that same concept gets applied by the scientists. And they take it and they make big graphs over the course of years. We're just doing 1 year, but who said we're stopping this year? So this is the one for those AQI measurements at those little circles on the map. Each one is measuring every day. So with this, it measures and it gets the highest value for the day, and then it plots it for that one specific day. And then it goes across for the whole entire year. So this is starting from 1999 all the way to 2023, measurements for 14 plus years. And we can see that back in the early 2000s, late 90s, the AQI measurements were just always worse. However, after they implemented tons of restrictions on automobiles with all of the, what is it where they make you do it every other renewal? Smog, thank you. All the smog regulations. You can see that as they implemented more smog regulations, we do see the AQIs come down over time. So this one is from the San Bernardino and Ontario region. This one is from the Riverside area. Riverside off the 210 going towards Indio, where all the trucks and all the major shipping lane goes through. Tons of diesel going through there. So the Rubidoux mountain right there actually has an AQI sensor. So that way they can measure the diesel output in the area. So this is one from Indio. You can see Indio doesn't have a whole lot going on because there's not a lot of people. But if you look in June and July, there's always going to be more worse readings because June, July, everyone's traveling. So we can actually see that across the board. June, July always has more driving. It always has more particle size 2.5. You can even see that in the late 90s on Rubidoux, there was a lot of red, a lot of days with tons of smog in the air, tons of pollution. But then as time went on, we do see reductions in pollution across the board. So things are improving with our health for the air we're breathing over time, but the question still comes, how much is that benefiting us personally? Now, not all sensors and areas get to have a sensor and report all the time. These things are funded by money. They're not just, spring up and last forever. Unfortunately, some of these sensors get set up and they only last for about a year, and then they break down and then they never get replaced. Like another one that was really good was over at the Ontario Fire Station, but then funding dried up, so then there's no more sensors. Luckily, at least they weren't reporting nothing but reds before they turned them off, because then that would have been a major issue. Fontana also has early on in the late 90s, early 2000s, more pollution, but things improved over time. And that's with people coming in. More people are coming in, but there's less pollution. Big Bear. Big Bear is a nice one. I would love to live in Big Bear. However, I can't afford it. San Bernardino, again, San Bernardino's got a lot of factories over in that area. They do a lot of production. Every day I'm at Loma Linda and I'm staying at Nickel Hall right next to this very place, which is where I spend every morning. I look out over towards the factories and unfortunately I see nothing but pollution coming out of the smokestacks. So it does reflect. But sometimes they lose the names, but as you can see, we trend these things and we look for them. And when we look at these maps, you can see that they eventually tell a story. The story can then be extrapolated to tell a story about the health of a population, even so far as to possibly explain why there's blue zone in Loma Linda. Now, what's the inverse? We're seeing all these decent examples of, good readings, but what is the inverse? What does it look like when you have bad readings, bad ones? Well, we learned this a few years ago when Beijing's and China's air quality was so bad that it was nothing but pure orange in the skies. And when they looked at this, you can see that it looks almost apocalyptic compared to this. No, thank you. Thank you. I would definitely love to live here. Now, these areas, now it doesn't just get over there. We do have these problems over here. This was actually outside my front door. During 2006, we had a massive wildfire over in Rancho Cucamonga in the Cajon Pass. It ate up most of the mountain. My high school got evacuated that day. I remember because that was my graduation year as a senior. And I took this from the front door when I went to walk to school. I walked to school in this. That was not a good idea. So how do you improve the environment? How do we counter all these things? How do we fight this if this is something that we're going to have to continuously deal with? And the answer is pretty simple. Just get a lot of filters. But the question also becomes, what do you do with those filters? And it comes to a simple join. So a join, you bring two things together and you make sure that they work together. In this case, a Corsi-Rosenthal box. A Corsi-Rosenthal box is created by, or was put together by Dr. Rosenthal over, I believe it's UC Davis. Forgive me if I got that wrong. But it's a very simple box that I have right here. And it's just a, box fan. This is a 20-inch box fan. Doesn't matter what brand. But all you do is you just get some duct tape, and you just tape it around the box. So now, instead of getting the furnace filter in your house that cleans the whole entire house, you put this in the room that you're cleaning to clean just the room faster and more effectively than cleaning the whole house at the same time. Now, I do this backwards, and I do run this at the beginning of a clean as opposed to the end of a clean, just like how I clean the floor incorrectly by cleaning the floor and then wiping down the table. But this cleans by forcing the air through the filter. And since the air goes through the filter, it picks up all of the PM 2.5, the PM 10, and if you get a high enough filter, bacteria, viruses, smoke, carbon, and everything else. So now at the university, we have a couple of these, but we have the professional version, the ones that were donated. When the Aliso fire broke out, they bought too many of the air filtration systems that they were giving to the residents of that area. So we got a few of the surpluses. Those are $2,000 to $3,000 units that clean the whole entire room in a house over the course of a day. This one works just as effectively, and I put it together for $40. So The Corsi-Rosenthal box takes the most simple mechanism, forced air filtration. And you can buy it at Lowe's just by buying a furnace filter and then just putting it on the box and duct taping it around and then making sure that the air goes through the filter so that way it cleans the room as it forces the air through the filter. Now, I made a very complicated one here that actually used 6 filters to create a cube. But that was me over-engineering it when it really all you need to do is just get one and slap it on the front and duct tape it. I just wanted to make it as complicated as possible for my son. Yeah, we had fun. Now, the question becomes, how long are these type of things good for? Well, it depends. The more you use it and the longer, the quicker it will go. But the more often you use it, the less it needs to clean. So if you use this very sparingly and use it only once in a while, it's going to go a lot quicker than if it's just kind of continuously running in the background. So you got to kind of think about it that way. And then you also got to ask yourself too, am I doing this in a closed room? You would be surprised if you did this in an open room without the doors closed because it's going to keep sucking the air in from outside the room. So not only are you cleaning your room's air, but then you're getting all this extra air entrainment from somewhere else. So you got to make sure the door is closed and that the room is sealed so that way you're cycling the air's in the room as opposed to pulling in from out. Sorry. So the Corsi-Rosenthal box is a very low engineering, low tech way that allows us to really fight the problems that we are seeing in our environment and in our house. I mean, I live right next to the 210 freeway. The air blows south from the 210, and my front door is facing the north. So the air from the 210 is always hitting the front door and always going straight into my house. My house has more dust than you can imagine within 24 hours. So this is what I use to keep my house clean because I have so much dust from just the normal wind. And these are just all of the studies that have been done. This box, when it came out, people were super excited. They just started publishing right away. And they got a lot of really good examples that showed that this works indoors to keep the air clean so that way you don't suffer from exacerbations that are related to chronic bronchitis, asthma, and then it also reduces bacterial count if someone has pneumonia. Because if you get a good enough filter, it will filter the bacteria that someone's coughing out. So you can keep infection from spreading. Which brings me to my last thing that I wanted to highlight. Let's say that you do have someone at home who is sick and is coughing a lot, and they're coughing green stuff out, really thick, nasty green stuff. You can tell that they have an infection just by looking at that. But the question becomes, how do I not get sick from this person who is coughing and that I love and that I need to take care of? Well, when all of the stuff with COVID was going around, I was, relaxed because at work we practice these things all the time. They're called isolation precautions. How do you keep someone from spreading everything else, spreading their disease to others? Well, luckily at home we don't have to worry too much about spreading to the environment because bacteria can't survive in the wild environment like they can in the hospital. So just opening the windows and pushing the air out so that way if a person coughs, it won't stay inside the house and concentrate. And then using these filters to circulate the air so in case something is there, it gets captured and won't spread further. Open windows, good clean air, water. It's just the same thing that we've always been saying. Just practice the basics, but practice them in a very meticulous and very, judicious way, and everything will be fine. God will take care of you. Now, as a person who works at Loma Linda and, has to, do research and publish, I always make sure that I include the really long and complicated way to do things. So this is the long and complicated way along with the really short way, but it's also with measuring. So I am very big in my own custom electronics. I build my own processors. I have my own microprocessors, my own custom sensors. And I brought my own example that measures PM 2.5, and I measure it in my house. And I just leave it running, and it will tell me if I need to open the windows or not. It's really only a $30 or $40 investment. However, it's a lot of time investment too, because you have to learn how to put everything together. But if you wanted to go the professional way, those are really expensive. So there's always the way to do things by yourself for low cost, but then there's always going to be the very quick and easy way, but with a lot of cost. And what I teach my students is we're not here to depend on someone else to do things for us. We're here to do things for ourselves and to teach ourselves to look out for ourselves so we can look out for others. So my thing to you today is to, come check out my box, and build one. They're fun. Me and my son built this one. Before we came, we had to replace the filter. So we went to Lowe's together, got all our stuff. We had nice father and son time, and then we went home, and then I had him put all the duct tape on while I watched and supervised. So this is my son's build right now, but it's a great chance to bond with kids. So thank you so much.
We have a few minutes for question and answer. Any question?
Oh.
How does all this affect someone who has sleep apnea?
So for someone with sleep apnea, the problem with sleep apnea is usually associated with just keeping the airway open. That's why you use a CPAP machine, just to keep it open. But to think about it, that CPAP machine needs to pull air in from somewhere. And it's got the filter on the side, but it's cleaning the air that it's pulling in. It would make it easier for the machine if it didn't have to go through all of its filter right away, if there was a cheaper one that did it for you, because those filters are expensive. Yeah.
Any more question?
Okay, so back in the early 2000s, it used to be a lot more smoggy, a lot more contaminants, right? Have you guys checked out the ratio from asthmatics back then to asthmatics now? Has it really changed that much, or, percentage-wise?
So that one's always changing, and it depends on the area that you're looking at, and that's the problem. So for Loma Linda, a lot of our population-based research has only come online in the past few years. When we went to all electronic medical record charting, they've included new things that allow us to filter by zip code for asthmatics that are being admitted to the hospital. So I've just finished setting that up in the past few months, and unfortunately, a lot of our records don't go back to that far. A lot of them started in like 2008, 2012. So we don't have the late 90s, early 2000s available in that manner. I'd have to go and get all the charts, open them up, and they're all on paper. So.
Okay, I'll wait for your report.
On the house air filters, they always have a rating
Yes.
stamped on that. Do you have a recommendation, or how fine should that mesh be?
Thank you for mentioning that, because when I went today to Lowe's, I was actually kind of upset because they just changed the labeling. It used to be MERV 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. I would always say MERV 13 and higher. That's what you want. But it's now MRP 1500 and higher. So 1,500 and up. I don't know why they changed that. I just found out this morning. So. Mr. Nguyen, there's one up here.
Recently I was watching a documentary or docuseries about something in China, and I noticed the air it's just white, had this white or PEG. Is that an indication of the poor or bad air quality, AQI rather?
It would most likely, I would not hesitate to think that it would be a very high AQI. The question would be which measurement in the AQI would be high. Would it be the PM 2.5 or the PM 10 or the carbon monoxide or the sulfur dioxide? Just which element is really being expressed that day. And that's the harder one because you have to be there and measuring it exactly.
Okay, thank you.
So why do they have a bad air? I mean, do they have a lot of industrial around in China?
Oh, so with the reason that I was reading for the Chinese where they're having those really bad pollution days was due to unregulated pollution from power output. So they weren't making sure that the exhaust that they were creating was clean prior to being released into the environment. So at San Bernardino, when they shoot off the smokestacks before the air comes out into the environment, it has to go through a filtration process so it's as safe as it can be before it's released. Over there, from what I was reading, they didn't have to do that. They just let it out. And since they just let it out, it let out all the contaminants, which then had negative effects on the environment and all the people's health. Because when it was at its worst, they were saying their filters were being used up by the end of the day. That filter was bad by the end of the day. So it was 24-hour changes. So that's how bad their air got. Yeah.
Recently I heard that the air quality, there's the comparison for the air quality at the coastal, in the coastal regions, at the beach and so, and the air quality inland, more inland, that the air quality at the beach is far more superior, if I may say so, to that of the inland areas. Like for me, I live in Cyprus, just across there, and but for some great and unknown reason to me, I like to frequent the Seal Beach, Huntington Beach area, just walk on the pier and get the fresh air from the sea. So that, when I heard that, I'm like, now I understand why I like the coastal air. I like to go down to the beach. But is that really so that it's very superior, far more superior than that of the inland regions?
I have always thought so myself. Personally, when I first started as a respiratory therapist, I had to travel and leave home, so I moved to San Francisco for 2 years. I have to say that when I was there, I was living next to the coast. That was the most healthy respiratory health I ever had in my life. I never had asthma. I never had any issues with breathing. But when I came back to Southern California, the first week I was coughing out black stuff. So the coastal air, it has that natural air that pushes all the stuff inland. So it's always getting fresh air. So it's always nice and clean. The other thing that most people aren't aware of is that the salt content of the sea is in the air. It's a little bit more salty sometimes. The cystic fibrosis patients who are born with cystic fibrosis, they're encouraged to go surf because the salt contents and all the physical activity of surfing and being around all that salt help keeps the lungs nice and moisture and wet, breaks up the secretions so they don't suffer as much. So the coastal area, you almost always will have better air than the inland area. Oh, there's some back there.
Thank you. How would you compare the impact of humidifier with ionizer features?
I'm sorry, I was having a hard time here.
Humidifier with ionizer features. How would you compare that to your Corsair Rosenthal fan?
The fire? Oh, humidifier, humidification system. Like for an area that just is dry? Is that the question?
Yeah, there's some humidifiers, humidifiers, which has a feature which is a ionizer.
Oh, okay, now I know what you're saying. Sorry, my bad. It was kind of hard to hear because of a little bit of the feedback. My hearing's going out too these days. With the humidifiers and the ionizer, that's you're paying essentially for an extra kind of like gimmick. It's not going to be proven. The thing about the humidifier that's beneficial is that you're making the air itself, the relative humidity, go closer to 100%. When that humidity gets closer to 100%, when you inhale it, it's just easier for the lungs because it doesn't need to humidify the gas itself. So when you inhale, the body makes that gas suitable for inhalation. When you use the humidifier, you're making the body not have to do it. Anything with like ionization or all those other really fancy terms, it's just, you're not going to get anything majorly beneficial extra. The main therapy is in just the humidification. Oh, there's,
The fan, is this the least expensive compared to air purifier?
This is the cheapest I could get it to go. I'm known at the university as being the cheapest professor there because I try not to spend any money whatsoever. I even try to avoid buying pens. This one is the cheapest I can get. I got this for $40 to $50 total. I waited for all the sales.
So is this as effective as the air purifier?
Yes,
Okay.
it will be.
Good.
You have to let it run though. You can't just turn it on for 10 seconds and say
Right,
it's good.
right.
You have to let it run for 30 minutes to an hour.
Okay, thank you.
For like a 2,000 square foot home, would you have 3 of those or?
I just get one and just move it between the rooms.
And just move it around?
Yeah, it's easier because then you don't need to spend any money.
If you have poor ventilation in your place, say you're living in an apartment or condominium, would you recommend to put more plants inside?
More plants?
Yeah.
Oh, I just like plants inside. I think they're beautiful. But so I would say yes. But the plants, it really comes down to what kind of plant. Because you got to ask yourself if this is a plant that releases pollen. And then you're asthmatic or allergic like me, then you're guaranteeing days of allergies and days of bad breathing, where I'm going to be using my inhaler all the time. So it really just kind of comes down to what kind of plants. Just make sure it's not dropping tons of pollen everywhere. What kind of plant? I have to ask Mrs. Casillas.
Have you heard of the snake plant? The snake plant?
Which one?
The snake plant. They said snake plant is very good for inside.
I am not familiar with the snake plant. I will look that up though. That is new to me.
Yeah. Yeah, the snake plant. They said it's very good for you.
Oh, this one? Oh, oh.
Yeah, that's. So when you talk about indoor pollution, how much of that is caused by pets and cat hair and things like that? Is that something that contributes to that? Should we be careful of that, especially if you had like 3 cats that live with you?
Yeah, they will add, especially if they're the long hair kind. That's going to be the problem. You see the hair on the couch when they're rolling around, because I have a cat too, and that cat leaves hair everywhere, so I'm following him all the time. The big thing about cats and the indoor pollution from the pet dander is to make sure that they're groomed all the time. And that's the hard part with pets, is keeping them properly groomed where they're not shedding. Because the shedding is what's going to get all the allergies going. Because remember, the cat cleans themselves, and then they shed everywhere, and then now that'll get you. Yeah.
So do you recommend air purifier?
Air purifier? Air purifier would be the same as this one right here. So it would work, yeah. If you have one already and it's working for you, then that's beneficial. But this is the one this one puts out a lot of air. So Once we're all done with questions, I'll turn it on and hover it so you can feel the air filtration and you can see it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, do you want to come up and see it? Yeah.
Yeah. Take it on.
So this is much cheaper than air purifier.
Right. Those are really expensive. They're like $300 right?
Yeah.
So, here,